Let's kick off, should we, with the... it's on the Times and the Observer, this sort of lateral flow test. The free test may be coming to an end.
Yes, indeed. It's the free lateral test that faced the axe under plans for living under COVID-19, which Boris Johnson will announce within weeks. But I have to say straight away that the government has not confirmed any details of this story. It's very much underplaying the story, and nothing has been decided yet. But yes, it could be that people will now have to pay for a lateral flow test. But having said that, the story also makes it clear that a lateral flow test will be provided for free to people with symptoms and also in high-risk settings such as hospitals, schools and indeed care homes. So the most vulnerable people.
It suggests they're sort of scaling things back. But if you have to pay for your own lateral flow test, will you do it at all?
Well, I mean, this is the question, should people need to? Because I think one of the things that, and the Sunday Times quotes some comments from Nadine Zahawi talking about the fact that we need to move from this setting of it being a pandemic and an emergency to the virus being endemic, to us talking about it being really focused on the people who need the tests most importantly, so care workers or people working on the front line. And your average Joe who's going out to the local pub, do they really need to test? I think that's the question that the papers are asking. And indeed, in the Observer quotes Dr. Clive Dix, who was the ex-chief of the vaccine strategy, who is really quite forthright and is saying that rather than this just being one small step, we need to completely rethink the way in which we are dealing with this pandemic. As Nabila says, there's no official comments from government. There's certainly no ministers coming out and saying we're changing plan. But the mood across the papers this morning seems to be that...
It suggests they're talking about it, doesn't it?
Suggests that there could be a change of tone. I think lots of people might...
Well, is that all to do with the fact that we're changing our attitude slightly? They want us to change our attitude, or is it a cost thing? Because this free test for everyone's cost about £6 billion, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely. I think the whole issue of coronavirus funding is obviously a hot potato politically. And yes, the government spent some £6 billion on testing, but private companies very close to the Tory party have also made huge profits during the pandemic. But I think, you know, more optimistically, perhaps this is a story about another sign that the pandemic is easing up effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if it will... I suppose at some point we're going to have to suck it and see, aren't we? Try this sort of thing out and see if things get worse or whether they get better.
Yeah, and I mean, the Observer is a really interesting piece that goes on to talk about the fact that, you know, we often talk about the sort of initial things like whether testing works, whether or not people need the vaccine, but then we don't look at the costs of all the restrictions. And they go into the detail of the fact that, for example, lots of care homes have taken in 40% less of people in the last year, which is, you know, it means that care homes aren't working. It means that there's something fundamentally wrong. And we know that there's a direct link between problems in care homes and the restrictions that have been put in place. I think most people now are starting to, as the fact that Omicron has proven itself to be less harmful to health, certainly more prevalent in its ability to spread, but less the consequences for people's health are less serious than the Delta, for example. I think most people are now looking at the issue in hospitals, the issues in care homes, the issues in schools, and saying, is it really worth us continuing on this route of treating everything like an emergency when we can see people suffering on the other side of it?
What I haven't heard from any virologist or anyone saying, they all say that it is likely there will be another variant. What's the likelihood of that variant? Yes, but what's the likelihood of that variant being less than Omicron? In other words, things are getting better. Or could it be worse again?
Well, nearly all scientists are now saying they accept that coronavirus will never go away. That's a fact. And instead, immunity from infections, thanks to vaccination, will eventually make it no less severe than a flu, say. But we have to bear in mind that a year ago, about 1 in 10 cases resulted in hospital admissions, but now it is fewer than 1 in 50 cases. So there is definitely a change in how severe this terrible disease is affecting us.
Well, that's the vaccination programme for you, a lot of people would say.